Welcome to episode 76 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. I am Blaze, your host, and this week we say goodbye to two more teams. One of them going out one of them being the bigger talking point of being, winning the minor premiership and going out in straight sets. We have a couple of retirees to cover an appointment as well, and a big announcement relating to the future of the AFL. But let's start by asking my fellow co-host, how are you doing, Mr. Sarek?
Not too bad, not too bad. I mean, I wish I could do what the Adelaide Crows with, because it's like actually be successful and fail from there. I do the second bit very well. The first bit tend to struggle with, so strange scenes. But as I said, made for the interesting bit of a pretty uninteresting semi-finals. As for myself, it was a bit of a quiet week. I had to go down and do a lot of errands on the week before. Nothing too exciting. I got to the weekend. Saturday I had to go out. Just another trip to Fremantle. Not sunny day until it started raining again. And on Sunday, it was rainy as crap with hella gusts. And I was like, yeah, I don't need to go down to Fremantle again. I think I'm good.
That's very
As
fair.
much as it pains me, I've missed a lot of Freo games this season. I don't mind that much. It's more just to support the club. It's sort of a probably 2 hour trip for me to get there. So, you know what I mean? It's like, well, if it's not going to be that great, it's not worth going. But, yeah, as I said, so a bit disappointed, but good to watch it on TV in the comfort of my home.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see the Freo W women get one over the Eagles. And apart from that, I'm looking forward to a bit of a quieter week.
Yeah, if for those who might remember our episode last week, it was my birthday over the past weekend. And I did my birthday stream with my birthday twin, one of my friends on the internet who is also a streamer. We had a lot of fun with that. I also went out. I was pretty much flat out busy all of Saturday as well. I went and saw my parents and my cousin. And I also had my own birthday dinner with a bunch of friends, which I was very glad to make happen. And then on Sunday morning, we did day one of the $1,000 or $100,000 USD Marvel Rivals event that we held. And we've wrapped up day two earlier this morning as of recording this. So, as of recording this, I've been awake for about 14 hours. So I'm doing great. But we're surviving. It was a lot of fun. It was our biggest event to date, and we're pretty happy with how it eventuated. But yeah, I think this week is definitely a much quieter week for me, thankfully, because I need a rest.
Sounds good. Quite a week, quite an episode, but strapping ourselves in for a big prelim finals this weekend.
Yeah, that's right. But before we get to the prelim finals, we've got a bunch of news that we actually have to catch up on, starting with the announcement of the AFL State of Origin returning, with WA and Victoria taking the first bout of the official return over at Optus Stadium.
Yeah, no, it's good to see, and because of the success of the Indigenous All Stars match, which I still think they're pushing to be on. I think they're going to have a few exhibition matches, but fingers crossed that still happens, because that would suck if that had to get replaced by it. Or it could just move to another state, one or the other. But yeah, State of Origin, a lot of people have been pushing for it. It makes sense to play it as a preseason, because it gives the players a bit of time to warm up, but like the Indigenous All Stars, it's probably going to be just play a lot of players, get a bit of a rotation, probably have some players just running around signing things to the people on the cheap seats near the front. And yeah, as I said, it's just about making it a good day out, because as I said, the in-game entertainment, in-stadium entertainment for the All-Stars game was very good. So I hope they do a good effort. I hope they, do a good job of promoting it, because especially for a casual, it's, good to promote some of the, not just the star players, but probably the fair amount of lesser players that will be playing, because I imagine a few of them will probably maybe not send the full talent. I think we'll probably be looking at it like, I reckon 80% of the big names. I think that will be a pretty good pool.
Yeah, I would assume that not all of the big name players would play, partially probably due to injury. For the most part, they don't want to risk
Yeah.
anything major. But yeah, it'll be
Yeah, if
it'll
they
be
have
huge
any
to
niggles, they would just
especially
get.
like show off the up and coming talents from WA and Victoria as well, from all pretty much all 18 clubs. I expect most of them will be represented.
Yeah, well, as I said, especially in the WA side, it's a fairly diverse. Um, Looking at the AFL sheet of players, so there's still few Eagles there. Hoff, Liam Ryan, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I didn't actually know Sam Taylor was Australian. And yeah, as I said, so even from the struggling clubs, there'll be a few representation. Trent Rivers, a man that we liked in Melbourne a lot this year. So yeah, should be a should be a good one. And yeah, I've said I'll probably try and make myself down there. Make myself down there. Make my way down there. And get around it. So hopefully it might be a boots on ground experience.
It could potentially be a double boost on ground because I'm very interested in actually trying to make my way over for this. Like this would be a really cool event to go
Yeah.
to. So if I'm able to make it work, that'd be pretty sick.
Yeah. Oh, I said we'll try and work it out, and we will obviously let you all know when the time happens.
Yes, yes,
Time happens
indeed.
and the time
Um,
comes.
but speaking of Trent Rivers and Melbourne, they have officially appointed their new men's senior coach in Stephen King.
Yes. So Stephen King. You're actually gonna have to. I forgot to load up the article, so you have to do the general. I don't actually know much about Stephen King.
I'll be honest, I don't know
Off the
too
dome.
much about him either, but reading through the article as we're talking through this, he has had coaching positions at St Kilda, the Western Bulldogs, Gold Coast Suns, and Geelong. So he has a fairly long-standing history of coaching at the very least,
Mm-hmm.
very solid amount of experience. He played in 1996. That was his debut season. I'm not entirely sure when he retired. Oh no, I found it. He retired in 2010. He played 240 AFL games across 15 years, including games at Geelong and St Kilda. He was also captain of the Cats for 4 seasons, including
Mm.
2007 when they won a premiership. Honestly, I didn't know that he was part of the 2007 premiership team, but there you go. Then moved over to the Saints
Not
in
team, wasn't it?
2008, and then retired at the end of 2010, and then
Yeah.
stayed at the Saints for 2 seasons, with a coaching stint before heading to the Dogs. Was part of the 2016 coaching staff for the Dogs for their premiership win and the 2021 grand final appearance as well. And then he was
Mm.
at the Suns for 2022 and was also their caretaker coach when Stuart Dew was stepped down in 2023.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But
I vaguely remember that.
even
Yeah.
with this appointment, he's currently at Geelong again. He's going to stay at Geelong until their finals campaign is over before jumping over to the Demons full time for all of their off season and preseason work.
Hmm. Well, it does seem like he's the right player at the right time because I'm reading through his wiki article and this is sort of crazy.
Mm.
He fell out of favour in 2007, played a lot of VFL game, played in the Cats 2007 VFL Premiership against Coburg, and then the following week, he replaced Mark Blake to go into the senior side for the grand final and obviously beat Port Adelaide by a record number. So, if they didn't make that change, they might have only won by 100 points instead of 119. So,
True.
yeah.
But
Big,
yeah, like it's
big
clear that
call.
he has plenty of experience. He's got over 30 years of
Oh, yeah.
experience, pretty much, in the system. So, whether he will end up being, the coach in the very long term to take the Demons to a premiership
Hmm.
again, or he'll be like their rebuild coach for however long they
Yeah.
need. But I think this is definitely the right call and the right person for the
Yeah, I
Demons
do
at the
too.
moment.
Because they were tossing up Buckley, but I think just Melbourne are too. I think they should be flexible on whether they rebuild or whether they continue on because I
Yeah.
do think that still good core there, but I think it's more just like you play some young kids, you work out the core based off that, and if the older ones can get you there, then it's even better. But yeah, you probably want to be giving a fresh set of hands this role because yeah, as I said, it's a mixed bag. If it doesn't work out, you're probably in the next bit of rebuild anyway, and if it does, as I said, it can offer something a bit more new and exciting because I don't think this team probably is worth shelling out for Buckley. As I said, I would be a bit too unsure with a bit of his history.
Bucks has said himself that he's kind of also keeping an eye on Tassie to see kind of where they want to go in terms of who they want their head coach to be. So yeah, if he wants to get back into coaching, which he clearly kind of does, like he's still got his options open, which is always a good thing to have.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying Buckley shouldn't be a coach again, but I think too, there's just something about it being like a bit more of a fresh start, like not bringing the meat. Because as I said, as good as Goodwin was with the premiership, unfortunately, some of the off-field stuff did catch up a bit. I think that's a bit hard to deny that it didn't. So, as I said, I know sometimes it's like, well, you need to bring in like a really solid player, but Buckley, I don't think he's quite got that people person side to him. So I don't know if King does, but at least it's like a bit more of a neutral palette. He'll be starting from a fairly fresh bait with fresh expectations. So keen to see how he goes. But I don't think anyone really knows what level of coach he'll be. It's just a bit of a wait and see.
Yeah, it's the only people that can really, I guess, comment on it is the people within the systems that he's worked in. Because again, as an assistant coach, it's really hard to really see from the outside what kind of effect you have. But I'm sure, like all the people that he's worked with would have spoken highly in regards to.
Oh, you probably can. They would have done their ringing around.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many responses they ever get. But well, clubs are a bit funny sometimes, but you would hope that they're very, very thorough.
True.
Yeah.
So this is good. This is good for the Demons. But sadly, it is now time to talk about a couple of retirements. And we are going to start with a retirement of Giants veteran and a veteran of the game, because he has played for more than one club, Lachie Keefe.
Exactly. And probably a very, very interesting journeyman because, yeah, he has only had a couple of... Well, actually, no. He's had 3 seasons of playing more than 10 games per year. And there's a couple of seasons where he was sub a lot. Actually, no, sorry. It's 5. I misread that. So, yeah, he played 119 games. He was a very, very speculative pick. Round 5, pick 69, as we say, nice, of the 2008 rookie draft. So he was very, very much in the lower spectrum. And he played a few games for the Giants. Few plays for the games for the Magpie. Known as a key position player, mainly as a ruck forward. But obviously, with the Magpies at the time, they had a very solid ruckman after Jolly? Was it Jolly?
It might have been Darren Jolly.
Witt? Yeah. I think Jolly into Witt. So, as I said, didn't get a spot there. The Giants sort of looking one to get a player, I think, after Shane Mumford and all that. Finished up. So after being inactive on Collingwood's list for, I think it was 2 years, he went to the Giants and made his debut there in 2018. I'm not sure if he was delisted or traded, probably delisted by Collingwood at some point. And then just was serviceable. Is a decent hit out, pinch hit, but he mainly played as a forward, and yeah, it was just okay. Sorry, not forward, defender. And yeah, as I said, he was just okay. Yeah, very unremarkable career. Probably the most remarkable thing that happened was this year, where he kicked that goal after the siren in the first game to get a notch over Melbourne, which probably we didn't know the implication. Like, if they didn't win that game, they might have been out the finals. But yeah, as I said, I did that. And yeah, there's not really much to say. Just a big man that just plodded around the league for a while because he was tall and, he was just serviceable.
Yeah,
About it, really.
there isn't too much more to really say. Like, he doesn't have any major accolades to his name. Like, he doesn't really have much in terms of important, like, major statistics. But like, he's someone who was very serviceable when required. Gave his heart for both of the teams that he played for whenever he was put in, and a 15-year career is still extremely impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, you just don't hang around the league by accident. As I said, even the tall journeymen that get there by being tall, there's other tall people that just never get an opportunity. So you still have to work hard. Even if you're not the most skillful, you have to pick up a bit of craft here and there. And Lachlan Keefe obviously did enough to do it. So he'll go into the worlds of, Andrew Phillips. What's another journeyman ruckman? Darcy Fort, even. There's probably more. I'm trying to think of some niche ones, but my brain's fading. So, yeah. Shall we sail him off into the sunset? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's it. So we shall salute you, Lockie Keefe, and we hope you enjoy your retirement. Our next retiree, a long-standing favourite over at Fremantle, and that is James Aish.
Yeah, and is a very mixed bag career. Very travelled 3-state player, which is often fairly rare. Started off in the Lions for a couple of years. Traded for steak knives. He was not part of the Exodus. I'm pretty sure they just sort of dished him off to Collingwood by memory, but I could be wrong there. He dished off the Collingwoods in the Dane Beam trades, wasn't it?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Anyway, that guy's got him. I was like, oh, he's a serviceable outside player, but, didn't really break into the side. Sort of cast off before the rebuild for the Magpies. Dockers, who had pretty much lost all their wing players for consecutive years, are like, okay, we'll take you. I think they traded like a 3rd-round pick for him. And it was probably the most serviceable he was in his career at the Dockers. Probably a couple of really good years on the wing. A bit more when they were still struggling. I think 22, 23 were a couple of his better years. But, just a decent outside player, put on a bit of tackling pressure, put on a bit of speed. Sometimes played halfback if he needed to, but otherwise, he was a bit, more forward thinking in his disposal. Not always clean, but very, very handy. And, as I said, he pretty much got the most out of his career. Again, not the highest skilled player ever to play the game, but pretty handy.
Yeah, I mean, when you play over 100 games for, one club, this one's obviously specifically being Freo, you really kind of make a name for yourself. And, even though he was, eventually pushed out, one with the side of injury, the other with just players around him getting better in his role, he definitely had a profound impact on the club and the community because he was clearly a very loved player on both sides.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I wouldn't say he's like a cult figure or anything, but I feel like again it was just like the Dockers finally picked up an outside player. Normally they were used to losing him, so I think they were just happy about that. And as I said, I think it was also one of the things when they first got him, especially from the Magpies. I think he always had that his disposal was a bit iffy, and still had a few errors at Fremantle, but he did actually clean up and became very serviceable. As I said, and again for Freo, it's not that often a player goes to Freo and plays better. They've unfortunately had a very bad run at that. So, James Aish can definitely get put on that list, though.
Yeah, there isn't too much more to really say, but I mean, 186 games, very, very good. fairly. I think played over 50 for Collingwood, over 100 for Freo, and then like a handful pretty much at Brisbane. But
Yeah,
overall,
32 for Brisbane.
there you go. And
Had a very
overall,
solid debut year. He was very much in contention for a rising star.
fairly solid career. Got pretty close to a premiership with Collingwood in 2018. West Coast obviously won that one. So, but
Mhm.
then um, sometimes we don't get the fairy tale endings, but we can still have a very long and a very impactful career regardless. And that's exactly what James
Hmm.
Aish did. So, in lieu of that, we salute you. We hope you have a fantastic retirement. And if there is anything else that you have to say, we will continue on.
No, I just looked up the 2014. That was the year that Lewis Taylor won over Marcus Bontempelli. Um, Marcus Bontempelli obviously never doing that well in personal awards. Just a bit, you know, bit roughly done. So it was sort of weird. They had 2014 Brisbane had two really good rising star players.
Oh yeah, fair enough. All right, next on our list is sadly a little bit of bad news for Hawthorn supporters. With
Yeah.
the retiring veteran Luke Bruest doing a really nasty injury in the VFL against Footscray, breaking both his ACL and his MCL.
Yeah, as I said, so that's pretty much both the ligaments that cross into your knee and they're dead. So, yeah, as I said, it's just such a shame because, Luke Bruce, the professional he is probably maybe considering playing VFL or whatever. Maybe he goes into coaching, but it's like, yeah, I'll see the season out. As he mentioned before, it was sort of understood he was there to bring up the young talent for this year.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously his role, unlike Gunston, he went into the main side and got, extended his career a bit more. Brucey stayed in the VFL. Very serviceable from what I imagine, heard. But yeah, as I said, it's just so unfortunate. And I think clubs are really good now. I don't think there's any clubs that are like cheap enough not to support him, even like through the rehab process next year. So, it might be one of those things where either if he does go into a coaching role, hopefully he'll find some facilities at whichever club takes him.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, Hawthorn will probably keep him around just as a staff member. Let him use the facilities, let him rehab it. Because, as I said, if you've ever done that sort of injuries, I haven't. I don't think you have you?
No, I have not.
Yeah. Rehab is painful. Like, it takes a year for the best medical people. Sorry, it normally takes around a year for the people with the best medical field to recover. So, as I said, hopefully, yeah, they can just look after him. And it is just sad, as I said. But, as I said, even, when you step one foot onto the field, you're always risking a bit and you always putting something of yourself on the line. It just really sucks that it happened at this point in his almost closed career.
Yeah, he was very close to getting a fairy tale ending of a potential fourth premiership under his belt, unless he played in
Mm.
the earlier, or like the late 2000s one, which I don't think he did. I think it was only 13, 14, 15.
Oh, you're talking about Hawthorn, mate. No.
Yes.
No, he didn't play in any. I don't know about VFL, but
So yeah, he almost got a potential 2025 premiership under his belt as well as a fairy tale ending, but unfortunately, it was not meant to be. But I would like to think that the Hawks are kind enough to a club legend that they will let him use the medical facilities
they
and
will.
the
Yeah.
recovery. Um, but other than doing a really nasty injury, we hope that Luke Bruce does have a very wonderful retirement. And if he does end up going into
Mm.
coaching, I think he would genuinely be a really good development coach because clearly he's done really
I mean, it's
well
got one of
with their
the.
younger talent this season.
Yeah. It's insane that Gunston is such a good set shot for goal, and yet Luke Bruce was known as a more accurate one.
Hmm.
Like, it's just ridiculous. So, I guess I'll give him another farewell. More for a speedy recovery, though.
Yes, we did already talk about his retirement a couple of weeks ago,
Mm.
so we don't have to go too in depth on that one. All right, we do technically have one more retirement to cover, one big one, but we're going to be saving that for after we talk about the semi-final game that he was a part of. For those that have probably already guessed, it is David Swallow. But first, we are going to jump over to our first semi-final match Thursday night over at the Adelaide Oval, the really, really important one that everyone's kind of been talking about. And with a 34-point margin, Hawthorn won it out against the Crows 14-17, 101 to 10-7, 67.
Yes, it was a straight sets implosion. One of the best offenses in the league in Adelaide was absolutely clamped down and didn't really fire a shot. All lines failed to fire against a clinical and well-structured Hawthorn. From the get-go, the Hawks' use of ball from centre bounce was absolutely clinical throughout the game. Jai Newcomb absolutely tore that area apart. I think he had 5 or 6 centre bounce clearances in the first quarter alone.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Yeah. But Adelaide was still able to get a bit of their turnover game going, so it kept the contest even in the first quarter. It was by far the most entertaining bit of the match. And then Hawthorn, smart tacticians they are, they just slowed the ball down. And it dried up all of Adelaide's outside movement options. And the few times they did get the ball forward, they were met with a blistering, solid Hawks defense. You know, as I said, we briefly mentioned it last week, but again, it is what you paid for. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, in the regular season, they looked exposed or not exposed, but like not that great. Like they weren't like the number one defense in the league or anything, but this is where it all seems to be coming together for that area of the ground.
Yeah, like we talked about it when like these deals were originally going through at the end of last season. That like what would Barris and Battle add to this defense? Like on paper, would it become like the number one defense in the comp, or at least like super super high? And you know, again, on paper, when you compare it to everyone else, it did become at least probably a top 3 defense. But now that we've actually seen it gel over the course of the season, they're finally like proving why they got Bruest and Battle specifically. Like they're probably the top 2 defense in the league right now. I would say the number one is probably Geelong.
No, I'd say it's Collingwood.
You think it's Collingwood, even with the issues that they've had in the past month or so?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Well, I don't think it's Geelong. It might have been GW. Oh, even GW's. Yeah, I guess it would be top 2.
I think they met on top 2, but I think the number 1 spot specifically could be up for debate.
Well, it was Adelaide. Like,
True.
they had a pretty stout defense before all this. I'm just going to go off opposition goals against. I'm actually curious.
No,
what was right. Yeah, the leanest defense for the year was Collingwood giving up 10 goals per game, Adelaide 10.4, and Hawthorn 10.5 goals per game. Geelong being right under that. So, yeah, as I said, sort of about the teams we've been talking about. But yeah, like in form, you would have to say Hawthorn top 2.
Yeah.
Specifically for this game, though, Hawthorn only allowed 9 set shots to Adelaide and 6 marks inside 50, half of what Adelaide normally get, and the same amount as Gunston got all night. He had a huge game. He put so much meterage on poor Mark Keane. He would have to say probably had one of the worst nights of his career in terms of moment and impact. Never like to talk too much about it, but it was pretty amazing to see when Adelaide were known to be one of the better defenses in the league. As I mentioned before, clearances were a huge issue as well for Adelaide. The centre bounce crew for Adelaide just didn't get involved in scoring chains, ground ball gets, or contested possessions. And, you know, as I said, I hate to say it, but it almost felt like start of the year Adelaide. You know, when the midfield weren't firing, Jordan Dawson was getting the ball but wasn't being that impactful. You know, when you look at both of his games, I'm not going to single him out because I think it's almost every player in that Adelaide midfield. There really wasn't much to it. So, as I said, I would say that was also, a bit of a shock because, as I said, I know, fair enough, losing it against Collingwood, but against this Hawks midfield, which, again, probably the weakest still in the finals. I think you have to say that, don't you?
Yeah.
Maybe Collingwood. I don't know, but Collingwood just get it done a bit more consistently.
Collingwood have always
So
been a lot more clinical with how they get it done compared to
yeah,
Hawthorn.
exactly. They've got that outside movement, but still can win a few clearances.
Yes.
So again, we're talking about the last 4 teams remaining in the competition.
Yeah, if you hadn't already put that together, like we've only got 4 teams left, may as well only talk about them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, as I said, I'd rather be the worst of the 4 teams left than the best of the bottom. Anyway, so yeah, Gunston off the chain. Weddle, if he could convert Weddle better, he would have had one of the best games on ground. Fortunately, he was very inaccurate, but he just, had a lot of speed, had a lot of marking influence that Adelaide again couldn't cover.
Mm-hmm.
I think Thilthorpe did really try. His third goal kept them in a sniff in the third quarter. Honestly, 33 points is a very generous margin for the game. Hawthorn didn't really look like losing it. So as I said, but in the last quarter, Adelaide just didn't give much of a whimper, and it was clear that Hawthorn were going to come away with this contest with a win and continue their season by beating first place from 8th.
Yeah, something that we had. I think the first to 8th is something we've never seen in AFL history, but I know first going out in straight sets is something we haven't seen in a very, very long time.
Since the 80s, I think it was.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, well, as I said, it was interesting because it was like not the most dominant first team ever, but at the same time, it's like they did relatively deserve it. Like their regular season was really solid. I just said the shock isn't so much that they had bad form or whatever. It's just that they didn't win any quarter in these 2 games. You know what I mean? It's just like, how do you just generate nothing? But as I said, again, 2 very well-coached teams can just make you look silly. As I said, Adelaide spent most of their time chipping the ball around in the backline, sorry. Hawthorn cut out angles really well off halfback and midfield. Like, their intercept, not so much intercept pressure, because their tackling pressure wasn't that elite. Like, it's not like this was a high-pressure, high-tackling finals game.
Yeah.
It was just the Hawthorn knew what pressure to apply to make mistakes. And it just made a lot of players look bang on average. And I don't know if you agree with it, but I reckon Thilthorpe, Worrell, and Laird would probably be the only 3 players that would, be at least par to the sort of performance that you would expect from any of the players that played.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I mean, I have 2 of the 3 of those in my stats, in my individuals anyway, so it's clearly obvious that there wasn't really that many obvious players.
I'm not hanging out to dry again, know.
I know he started as a sub, but was Fogarty really worth the risk? Oh, sorry, Rochelle really worth the risk this week?
I mean, he did come in and have a bit of an impact, so it's sort of hard. I mean, I guess, yeah, Rochelle, you remove him from the equation. In fact, he came on and I think kicked a couple of goals. It was a bit junk time, but you know what I mean? It was okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
But, as I said, I think it's more just, I don't know. Like I said, he played half the game, kicked a couple of goals, but otherwise not that much impact. I think it's just I think it was more just the fact that Adelaide at no point looked like they had their midfield set. Like, I know their forward line didn't do that well, but there were moments, and yeah, it was due to Thilthorpe, where it looked okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, their midfield just looked off all 8 quarters, I should say. And their back line, at least for probably 7 of the 8 quarters, were pretty bad. So, as I said, there's just way too much. Like, this was a systematic failure. The Matthew Nix haters will be out in full force. There has to be a toxic coach position filled in the state of South Australia as deemed by law. But yeah, as I said, it's hard to be too harsh on them. As I said, they were coming from bottom four to top four. And, like, if they made elimination final and just lost, it would still be seen as a successful season. But they get in straight sets and they lose out that way. And it's just a bit,
Yeah, there's not much to really say about that. I mean, Hawks were just far more accurate. They were far more threatening all over the ground, far more impactful all over the ground, and they're back in prelims. They're back in the top 4 spot, pretty much.
And again, it's growth from last year because, as I said, in this time last year, again, facing an Adelaide side in their home crowd, it felt like they could have been a lot chirpier. I said it a bit last week, as I said, this seemed like a team that, as I said, that it's very dangerous because if this is like true and like Sam Mitchell has worked out how to like control, like, because obviously last year they just let him play. It was the hawk ball, it was the memes on the social and all that sort of thing. But to be like, okay, we're still gonna have exciting players, we're still gonna like do all that, but as I said, we're gonna flesh it out. More players are consistently playing their role. And as I said, they got to a prelim. I know they had the boost in the back line, but
yes.
as I said, their outside midfield dominated in this game. And that's Connor McDonald. That's what's his name? Dylan Moore as well, but what's his name? The Sam Butler.
Yes.
He was surprisingly good. Sort of a game out of nowhere. Didn't even play much of the year, and he had 2 important goals and a lot of tackling pressure. So, even Mabiel Cho, he didn't have the best game in front of goals, but he was still doing bits here and there.
Yeah.
And, as I said, that's the thing about this Hawthorn team is like they got their worst players into this game where Adelaide couldn't even bring their best players into this game. So, it's just how it is.
Yeah, it's just how it is. We can't really. I mean, we probably could say a little bit more about the Adelaide side of things, but we have spoken kind of at length in regards to like outside factors that probably had a big impact on like the team's mentality. Like genuinely,
yeah.
I mean, to be fair, Nix has kind of said it himself that like the loss of Rankin really changed like their entire group dynamic, and like
I know that, but
mental boomage is a real thing because it happens a lot in esports. I can confirm this. But it's just
but like if you can't, like, as a coach, you have to be preparing what you do without certain looks, and even if it's just like a centre bounce without Rochelle, like you can't be that bad with Jordan Dawson still in your midfield. Pete Ling, who's still a very solid player. And Saligo, who's up and coming, but as I said, they brought in players to even out. Isaac Cumming, who probably was a bit wasteful, outdone by a few other players. Sam Berry probably had a very ordinary game. Pedler, unfortunately played a bad game after having a really good back half of the season. So you know what I mean? It's just like these midfield profiles are very similar in terms of age and experience. Hell, even if you look at the ruck battle, like Lloyd Meek absolutely thrashed up Riley O'Brien, who's had problems all parts of this season. But they signed him for a contract extension. I'm not saying, you need to cut O'Brien or all that, but you can see in certain parts of the years, he gets a few hit-outs. He got beaten in the hit-outs in this one, but, he's not that great outside of that. He's not a good clearance ruckman. I think I said before, I think he's one of the worst of the, high centre bounce ruckman. So I think it's really just, I think it is a bit on Adelaide, not just because of the Rankin thing, but, as I said, like you can say, oh, you got to settle them down, and maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but I just think structurally, they just had a lot of problems before that. They relied so much on really great goal kicking, really great defense. But you find a coach that's able to disrupt them. Maybe it was really. I actually think that these were the worst two matchups for Adelaide. But there's no reason why they should be losing 8. I do think that's a concern, but as I said, you have to put it in the wider context. They did finish bottom 4 in a very competitive season, but that leap was good. They're still building towards the future, but as I said, these are how you get teams that are always a bit of a what if, seemingly have a lot of talent but never seem together. Those are the sort of areas where you have to patch up. As I said, no, that's about it. I think Adelaide's probably done, probably had enough of being slammed on for too long. But as I said, Hawthorn, on the flip side, just goes to show you what good coaching can do. You take advantage of your situations, and all of a sudden you're in a prelim from 8th.
Yeah, it's a fantastic position for Hawthorn to be in, and if they can push through, then they're in a grand final, and something they haven't been in since 2015, which is crazy to think about.
10 years ago, I know.
But it shows that how hard they've worked to get to this position, especially from 8th. So I'm gonna actually, unless you have another point to go through.
No.
All right.
Go ahead.
In that case, we will jump over to our individuals, starting with Jack Gunston. Of course, he absolutely dismantled the Crows' defense, kicking 5-3 from 16 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 7 marks with 6 of them inside 50, and 10 score involvements. Youngster Sam Butler brought the pressure, kicking 2 goals from 15 touches, 5 score involvements, 9 tackles with 3 of them inside 50, and 20 pressure acts. And then Jai Newcomb was absolutely unstoppable in that midfield, kicking a goal from 28 disposals, 26 of them effective, equating to 92.9% efficiency, 16 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 6 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 10 score involvements, 13 pressure acts, 11 ground ball gets, and 408 metres gained. Josh Worrell for the Crows did the best he could down back, finishing with 33 touches, 26 of them effective, equating to 78.8% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 12 intercepts, 10 marks, with 4 of them being intercept marks, 3 inside 50s, 3 score involvements, 6 tackles, 19 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 2 spoils, and 610 metres gained. And Rory Laird also moved the ball well, collecting 30 disposals, 29 of them effective, equating to 96.7% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 7 marks, 4 clearances, 5 score involvements, 5 tackles, 13 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, and 3 spoils. And on the injury side of things for the Crows, Mitch Hinge came off with an ankle concern, so that'll be something he'll likely be looking at more closely in the off-season now that they have the time. No MRO for either games, actually, which is very surprising. But that means that we can, I guess, salute the Crows. Again, the past month or so has been very complicated in terms of how the general public kind of feel about the Crows. But besides that, they have had a fantastic season. And
yeah, exactly. And as I said, I think both of us have reasons why we have a bit of schadenfreude for the Crows going in straight sets.
Yes.
There's always got to be some team doing something funny in finals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
But as I said, overall, though, as I said, that's why I try to keep a bit of focus on the general season. General season in general. You know what I mean. The season as a whole for Adelaide, and I think overall success is just, as I said, I think Nix and the group need to hunker down, just work out how to maximize consistency when teams are taking away your best options. And if they do that, they'll come next season stronger than ever.
Yes, absolutely. But with that, we will now move on to our second game, the Friday night Q Clash blockbuster between the Lions and the Suns at the Gabba. And with a 53-point margin, the Lions won out, proving they are still the big brothers and can still bring it when finals comes around, winning 14-16-100 to 6-11-47.
Yeah, so honestly, it was just a bit disappointing how ruthless the Lions were. And we've seen them destroy teams in the past, probably a bit less this season. but, they've still got that killer instinct in them. And I think they were almost a team with a bit to prove just there because, as I said, whilst it is a bit disappointing that the Gold Coast do leave the finals, they, again, have a huge tick for their season. Probably even maybe a bit more for the Crows because, again, they got their finals win after making finals. They're on the path to being a relevant franchise. But this game was definitely an example of where the limit sort of was. And it was, again, sort of like the Crows, with some of their outside players and some of their forward half players just not quite getting the game done. It was a very straightforward victories on the flip side for the Lions. The Gold Coast struggled to get hands on ball, which turned into a territory loss and made their, probably just an okay defense for the day. They had to defend a lot of entries, just lose by the weight of those entries that I said before.
Mm-hmm.
The outside game, which I alluded to earlier, very much dominated as expected by the Lions as marks and outside movements just racked up. This was a game where the Lions just had their forward half on lockdown. And, as I said, we've got a few teams like Hawthorn and Collingwood play a very similar style. Brisbane and Geelong play similar-ish styles. But I don't think there's a better forward half trap than Brisbane Lions coming into the last bit of the finals. Like them in their prime are almost inescapable. And it's going to be a very scary thing for Collingwood to try and rack up against.
Yeah, agreed. This was a game that was definitely won purely, I think, majoritively by experience in finals. I think this was the type of game that had that extra finals pressure more than I guess the others have kind of really had. And the inexperience of the Suns might have gotten to them a little too much with just how much the Lions could bring.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the tackling was probably a bit more than the other game.
I'll talk about that number specifically in the individuals.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, but I think it was more just like Brisbane were getting the kicks they wanted to them. They wanted for themselves, and they also forced possessions that they wanted Gold Coast to have, which was the panic kicks, the dump kicks, because again they couldn't really get possession as much. But Gold Coast are a very good ground ball team. They're very good at handball chains, and they don't need a lot of marks to be successful. So it was like when the Gold Coast is almost the opposite of where you approach most teams. Most teams is like, when they're marking control, you want to limit their options. But Gold Coast, when they get the ball to ground and, try and beat you on the ground level, you want to start limiting options, which Brisbane just did because, again, it's not like Gold Coast midfield group. It's not like Adelaide where they just fell flat. Like, Matt Rowell, fantastic game. Noah Anderson, decent game. Alex Davies probably stepped back, and Tick Miller, again, well above average game, even though he didn't attend that many centre bounces. So, you know what I mean? It's not like that they were bad. It's just that they were comprehensively beaten, unfortunately.
I agree.
But shifting to other areas of the ground, there was a bit of absence in the forward line. Ben Long had a pretty average game, and the first quarter shift of putting Harris Andrews on Ben King. I can't remember who King was on in the first quarter. I think it was Gardner. He got a few goals early, but once Andrews won on him, and it's not what the Lions do all that often. Like Andrews isn't a on the best defender sort of defender. He's a sag off, but once he went on King, all the entries just seemed to struggle to convert into meaningful score. As I said, I forgot to mention when I was talking about the midfield stats. Even though Brisbane did dominate the clearances, I will give Gold Coast credit. It was a 43-25 clearance loss, but that was only turned into a 15-point differential in score from stoppage. But from that, it also meant that a lot of Brisbane's score came off turnover. And that's what I was sort of setting up. Because, as I said, it wasn't just, their defensive half of the ground. It was a lot of pressure from their midfield. They got a really even split between forward half points and defensive half points, even though I was talking about crap earlier, which was still true. They weren't actually as efficient in the forward half with that trap, but it was complemented from some brilliant back half movement. But as I was mentioning, as I said for the Suns, when they had it on their strength, Brisbane just stopped them enough to where, they fell a bit flat. And obviously, as I said, yeah, the midfielders were getting the ball, but a few of the fringe players, I'm going to single them out, but this isn't just to say, oh, these are terrible players. But you know what I mean? It's something that the Gold Coast have always struggled with, and probably still, that separation between them and the really good teams. Humphreys, Ainsworth, Fiorini, and Weller were all pretty much absent, and I think their halfback rebounders really struggled. Partially because, as I said, their outside movement is a bit weaker than other teams. But also, just because Brisbane set up pretty well as well. So, at the end of the day, Gold Coast just didn't have a wide enough range of players to break through the forward half press of the Lions. Unlike the Cats, who did manage to contain them the week before. But I think also the biggest win for the Lions would just be on the defensive side. It was a bit of an easier task with Reid and Farah being a bit step down in threat level, but it is still one that boosts the confidence before taking on the Pies the next week. Because again, you're talking about two teams with moderately fluctuating form, but geez, their peak, when they have confidence, as I said, like for me, and I guess this is getting a bit ahead of myself, like Geelong are still the team you would most expect to win the grand final.
Yeah.
They've been brilliant, relatively consistent all year, apart from a few freak games. But it would be foolish to say the peak of the Lions or Collingwood wouldn't be able to beat them. And then, as I said, you have that dark horse in Hawthorn in the mix, wrapping up that pre-finals preview.
Agreed. I've been talking about this past couple of days, but like I can very much see Geelong and Collingwood being the two grand finalists. But right from what we've seen from the Lions, what we've seen from Hawthorn, they can genuinely make it in a really, 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 really close preliminaries. So that'll be very, very good to see. Hopefully. We always love, as when you have no real stake in either of the four clubs, you just want to see a really good close game, because that's what finals intensity is kind of all about, really.
Yeah. And in prelims are normally better for that, because in the grand final, like once you start to lose, like that can often blow out. And I'm not saying like a lot of these teams will come back. Like once you know, but it's a lot easier for a game to slip. Whereas the prelim, it feels like it can have a lot more ebb and flow. You know what I mean? Because the intensity is just huge. It's a bit easier to keep your focus. But it's still got that intensity. It's still got that finality as well. So, as I said, I reckon I would love for both these prelims to close. I think there will be one classic in this. I'm not sure who, but I imagine it would be Brisbane Collingwood. But we'll see. We'll talk about that in a bit, obviously.
We will. But I'm going to jump over now to our individuals. And, going off of what we were talking about before with tackles, especially Brisbane's tackling pressure, one man stood above them all, and that is Josh Dunkley. He absolutely dominated the pressure game, finishing with 20 touches, 15 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 8 contest possessions, 5 marks, 4 clearances, 5 score involvements, 18 tackles, which is insane, especially in a finals game, and 34 pressure acts to boot. Will Ashcroft was excellent through the midfield as well, kicking 2-1 from 28 touches, 70 contest possessions, 7 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 11 score involvements, 4 tackles, 11 pressure acts, 11 ground ball gets, with 6 of them being inside 50, and 466 meters gained. I think he was actually the one that kind of stepped into Lachie Neale's role, more so than Bruce Revel, who's the player that they brought in to cover Lachie Neale. I think they kind of switched their position slightly. And, pretty much all since they recruited Will Ashcroft, like he's kind of been under Lachie Neale's wing the most in terms of playing through that midfield and playing that kind of tough on that running like pack breaking kind of role.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, as I said, I think he gets that, well, I mean, it's also just because of how he looks. Like, he looks like a very outside handball receive sort of midfield, but like, he's got a lot of grunt to him.
He does.
And you know what I mean? I think Brisbane are so good at this, is like, they can just like let their best players play, the game they needed to. Because, as I said, he's like, they still were very split with the centre bounces. He actually had less centre bounces than last week, Will Ashcroft. But the impact of the ones that he did were massive,
Agreed. And then to round out the Lions players, co-captain Harris Andrews kept the defense locked down, collecting 20 touches, 17 of them effective, according to 85% efficiency, 10 intercepts, 14 marks, with 7 of them being intercept marks, 4 score involvements, 10 1%ers, 9 spoils, and 371 meters gained. On the Gold Coast Suns side of things, Matt Rowell competed well, kicking a goal from 23 touches, 18 of them effective, equating to 78.3% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 4 inside 50, 6 clearances, 8 score involvements, 8 tackles, and 19 pressure acts. And then Sam Collins defended what he could down back, finishing with 12 disposals, 11 of them effective, equating to 91.7% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 11 intercepts, 4 marks, with all of them being intercept marks, 3 tackles, 12 pressure acts, 10 1%ers, and 8 spoils. And because there is no MRO and no injuries, thankfully, that pretty much wraps up the semi-finals. So we salute the Gold Coast Suns. They know this is clearly a very successful season for them because, again, they made it to the finals for the very first time. They won a final for the very first time. So they ticked a bunch of boxes already.
They forced a coast-to-coast apology from Cyric for pretty much saying that they were almost guaranteed near bottom 4. I think I said that they'll be closer to the bottom 4 than they would the finals, which was a completely flat-ass wrong.
I'll be honest, ever since they won their final last week, I've been like the quote from Dimmer when he was first appointed the job of him saying like, the list that we have now, I think a majority of these players will potentially be in our first ever premiership side. I genuinely think he's correct in that now that we've seen what he's actually capable of with this team. Do we think that they'll still need to move around a couple of players, either bring some more people in,
probably,
or I get people from the draft, etc., etc.? Yes.
Mm.
But what they have
if they're talking about prospects,
they have a lot
That's
of
it.
They have a lot of really important key players, both superstars, both role players, and it's just those little tweaks here and there, mostly in the forward line and the back line, that they just have to work on.
Yeah, because there's still a few players like Roses or the person we were talking about just then actually, what's his name?
Like your Fiorini,
Ainsworth has been Weller, as I said. You've been a bit up and down or a bit older, and you've got to wonder exactly if they will stick around. As I said, I think I've talked at length how Gold Coast have to have sought out their older players that are sort of still on the list and still up and down with their form. But I can't say that they haven't gone about this the correct way because they've needed those players here. Like, we've seen a lot of those players have good game, where I think the next step will be finding younger players that can provide more consistency and letting some of those older players retire. And as I said, I think that's part of the 20% that Dimmer would said, probably wouldn't be a part of it. But, as I said, with the young talent, that's there. And yeah, as I said, I think that was a very fair assessment. But unfortunately, there is one talent that will not be there in their 2020 whenever premiership. I was about to say like a definite date. I don't know when, if they win a premiership.
True.
Shall we talk about David Swallow?
Yes, this was announced on the eve of the final series that David Swallow will retire once the Suns' finals campaign has come to an end. And after 249 games, he has officially called time on his long-standing career. The last inaugural Sun still on the list. officially closes the book on the first era of the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah, and as I said, depending on how you want to, uh, you know, interpret the draft when they came in. Technically, the first draft pick, or at least the first official draft pick for the Gold Coast, David Swallow, pick one, round one, 2010.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? Pretty great career for a number one draft pick. The only problem was some of the injuries in the years where, probably you would consider his peak, which would be probably 2015 and 2020. And probably also, too, that the peak of David Swallow probably coincided with the worst years for the Suns. He was still developing in the early days when Ablett threatened to drag the Suns kicking and streaming into finals.
Mm-hmm.
Then he sort of comes around and there's like no talent near him. And now he sails off into the sunset with a very capable team to leave behind. But in terms of personally, he was always like that hard nut, multi-purpose player. Like he wasn't ever really. I guess he was a pure midfield, but he wasn't like known for his clearances. It was just his. What do you think? Like his evenness of his games.
Yes.
His peak clearances was still decent. Like it was 5.4 clearances a game around 2020. Sorry, 2019. I was going to say that would be a bit weird, but yeah. He absolutely fantastic play. He was good. If you gave him the ball, he was still able to win it on his own. And for, as I said, because him and his brother were both very hard nuts. Andrew Swallow used to play for Melbourne.
Yes, that's right.
But I would say David was probably their cleaner one of the two. I'll say his ball use was a tiny bit better. I'll say he was a perf boy.
Yes.
Came from... According to this, it says East Fremantle. I didn't actually remember him ever playing for them, but might have been his brother that played for a different one. And yeah, as I said, he was just a very solid player, got involved in scoring involvements in a time where the Suns had a pretty abysmal forward line. So he was one that was always trying to keep things generating for the Suns. And I think, as I said, that was probably the best description of him. He was a generator. He always did what he could to get the most out of the Suns. He just never always had the backing around him to put himself in like the pantheon of players. But I think he will go at least into the Gold Coast Suns lore as a fan favorite, as a club legend.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as I said, I don't think the AFL community probably appreciates how decent David Swallow is enough, just from how variable the supporting cast he had around.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, he's definitely going to go down as a club life member at the very least. I mean, he was co-captain with Jared Witts. He passed that role down to Took Miller at around 2021 or 2022. He was for a while he became the longest serving player to have never played a final. But there was only one other player ahead of him, I guess, in that, with 269 games played without ever playing in a final, being Robert Flower from Melbourne back in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, like what David Swallow has done for this club, pretty much right from the beginning, is nothing short of extraordinary. The fact that he was he's been with this club from the beginning and never wavered. He was loyal to them till the very end, when one, his body couldn't entirely keep up anymore, and two, he felt like they were finally in a position to where they didn't necessarily need his leadership anymore. That they've developed enough strong leaders around the club and have brought in the talent that he wishes he had, really, when he was at his peak. To potentially again bring this club to their maiden premiership. And yes, it's not this year. But damn, they sure did put up a fight for it.
Yeah. That's sort of funny. It's like even in his farewell thing, it says the Suns champion veteran defender announces his retirement, but I reckon David Swallow, if you were gonna pick like a non 190 centimeter plus player to be like, this is a utility role, like just pure utilities, plug and play everywhere. I think it would be David Swallow. Had to play off halfback for a good chunk of his career, had to play at the forward line for a good chunk of his career, and he could still go in the middle. So,
Yes.
as I said, he was literally just wherever they needed him, he would go. And as I said about the variability, he was needed to go in a lot of he always boosted the areas which he was in.
Yes, that is right. And whilst it kind of felt kind of tacked on to David Swallow's retirement announcement, Sean Lemmens, who has been with the Suns since 2013, also announced his retirement in the same week. He had played 149 games for the Suns, very close to that 150. But
Yeah.
due to injuries and just like kind of really struggling with decent form, he just couldn't break himself back into this side. Very understandable. Like this side is extremely strong in the role that he was kind of like trying for. I believe it was primarily as a lockdown defender mostly, and maybe a little bit in the midfield. But 149 games definitely nothing to scoff at. Had a fairly
Yeah.
solid 12-year career. Can't complain. You can't really complain too much, but it's clear that he
Yeah.
loved
I
playing for
think
the
it was
Suns.
just,
I don't think he
yeah.
ever really wavered in terms of looking for other opportunities. But it's sometimes when a position is just filled by an insane talent, it is just really hard to break back into it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he was very consistent in an abysmal defense. Uh, that's pretty much it, because I said, like, the years where he was playing a lot, 16, 17, and 18. Yeah, as I said, the Suns weren't really known for their defense. It wasn't like, the Sam Collins era where they've almost sort of built up from defense. Um, as I said, he was sort of a player that you never really were like, he probably not quite talented enough in terms of, you know, being able to stick on their player, being able to lock down a bit. But as I said, pretty tough assignment, and he stuck with it. Stuck through the fat, and as I said, he's sort of one of those players that he'll be a forgotten name. But as I said, you can't discount the fact that as I said, in a very tough, a very bad Suns defense. As I said, there were other things contributing to that. It wasn't just Sean Lemons.
Correct.
But as I said, he tried to do the role the best he could. Never the best player, but stuck through some very hard times and has left the club in a very good position at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So, provided we don't really have anything else to cover with these two, we will salute them, wish them fantastic retirements. I wouldn't mind to see David Swallow in like a semi-coaching position somewhere down the line. I think he has a really good footy brain for it. But if not, I hope he has a good retirement with his family and finds something
Yeah.
outside of the footy to love. But with that, that
Yeah.
brings us now to week 2 of our coast to coast MVP votes. So do
And
you
unlike,
wanna start us
yeah, I
off?
was going to say, unlike last week where we couldn't even decide on who our best players were, well, we could, we just didn't have much agreements. We're pretty decent this week. Adelaide versus Hawthorn, we'll start off with that. And no surprises, I've personally gone with Hawthorn with 5 votes going to Jai Newcomb. I
Mm-hmm.
think from the start, he established dominance. That puts so much pressure on Adelaide through his centre bounces. The game was controlled through him, but that's not to say the next player wasn't also instrumental, which was Jack Gunston.
Yes.
5 goal frees, tons of marks inside 50. He was absolutely fabulous. I mentioned Hawks' defense was absolutely instrumental, and although I think he's a tiny bit of a step back from the top 2, this is still in really fantastic game territory. Josh Battle, absolutely instrumental in shutting down. I think he was on Fogarty. He had next to no impact. He racked up the interceptions. And, as I said, all the Hawthorn defenders but I think Josh Battle probably had the most impact going the other way. Going back to that Hawks midfield, I put Josh Ward as my number 2 pick. 32 possessions, a really solid amount of impact. It's one of those ones where I was like, did he have a few cheap impacts? But had a lot of score involvements. So, you know, as I say, considering how dominant the Hawthorn midfield was, I would put Josh Ward up there. And finishing off that point, Lloyd Meek, he absolutely dominated Riley Thilthorpe. I was about to say Sam Jacobs. Riley O'Brien.
Yes.
Gave him an absolute bath. And while, you know, around the ground, he was still solid. It was really in that tap work where it was pretty embarrassing, the sort of bath that he was able to put on. But again, set up a lot of the good midfield work as well. So he gets my 1 vote.
Yeah, that's fairly agreeable. I pretty much had the exact same list, although I did put 1 Crows player on mine, and my top 2 are a little bit switched around. So I actually have Jack Gunston as my first position. Again, 8 scoring shots, 5-3 conversion. Overround, very, very solid impact. Again, had the same amount of inside 50 marks as the entirety of the Crows forward line. So he was just a one-man army for the most part up there, which is fantastic to see as always, especially considering his age. For my 4 votes, I did go with Jai Newcomb. Again, like, it was really hard to kind of really split these two. Like, Newcomb was absolutely phenomenal through that midfield. Josh Battle in defense also got my 3 votes. Again, exceptional work. I was debating on maybe splitting it up with Breust and putting Breust in my 4th slot, but I did not put him there. Instead, I did put Lloyd Meek. Again, his tap work is phenomenal. His around the ground work, whilst not at the peak as it has been throughout the season, is still very, very good and matched up really well against Riley O'Brien. And then the number 1 vote for me was Josh Worrell, because I thought that whilst he did have to pick up the slack on some of his other defenders, especially Mark Keane getting absolutely beaten pretty much the entire night, I thought Worrell did really well in terms of intercepts, in terms of just trying to get those clearances out of halfback and try to keep moving the ball forward when he could. I thought he did some very solid work there. Shall we jump over to the Q Clash?
Yeah, I was just gonna raffle off some general ones I was adding around. I was considering Sam Butler, Jack Scrimshaw as well. Played pretty fantastic. As I said, it is amazing how he's last year, but he's still getting involved in the intercept and providing a bit of run the other way. And you know, as I said, I was a bit on the same boat as you. Is do I give a vote to Worrell or Thilthorpe? But as I said, I think it was just because Worrell was probably more consistent, but a part of a very loose defense. He still had a few defensive lapses along with the rest. It's just, you know, he probably had the normal amounts, whereas everyone else had a pretty
it was a little bit more noticeable because everyone else was lacking.
Yeah, as I said, and Riley Thilthorpe, you know, as I said, 3 goals, kept him in the games and a few decent hit-outs, but it was pretty much a third quarter influence by him. And as I said, I just thought Hawthorn was so good that probably not going to give a vote to them, which means that I didn't give a single vote to an Adelaide player. I will get flamed by Shorty when this episode comes out.
Yeah, probably.
Hashtag biased, hashtag terrible, whatever. But as I said, unfortunately, probably reflective of the season they had, final series they had, I should say.
Yeah, no, I do agree. But I mean, when you lose all 8 quarters, it's not a great look. But let's jump over to the Q Clash votes.
Yes, and starting off, we've got a returning name. He took a week to get on the board, but our former Coast to Coast MVP got a perfect 5 from me. Will Ashcroft, absolutely fantastic game in the middle. Both his clearances, his outside game, and positioning. He had a few good intercepts that led to goals. So, yeah, as I said, he was absolutely fantastic. For hard not to say Dunkley, I know he didn't get as involved with ball in hand. Honestly, the whole game was for Ashcroft, but I think by design, Dunkley knew his role. and performed it to peak perfection. I mean, even McCluggage arguably had a quieter game possession-wise, but still did fantastically.
That entire trio was just playing out of their minds, honestly.
Yeah. And third, I'm sorry for the disrespect, but I'm going to have to double check which Berry plays for Brisbane. But I'm pretty sure it's which is it? Jared Berry.
Yes, okay. It is Jared Berry.
I
was generally going to say the other one. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it's not Sam. Yeah, it is Jared Berry.
Yeah. Jared Berry, as I said, on the outside, he was absolutely instrumental. Got a few, again, like Ashcroft, got a few intercepts on the outside and kicked, I think it was a couple of goals himself. 1 goal, 1.
Oh, yeah.
But got involved in a lot of play and was excellent in transition. As I said, a lot better marking option than what Adelaide could provide. Sort of the difference between those two outside games. Then, obviously, Harris Andrews, we talked about him before. His shift on King, absolutely shutting him down while still getting involved in intercept.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was a bit of a toss-up. I was going between who you put as your number one. Oh, sorry, not number one. Singular vote. Yes. But I went with Darcy Wilmot. I thought he had a pretty fantastic game on the intercept. As I said, a lot of the talk about, the deep defense, but he was also like hanging around off halfback, getting a few intercepts and generally using the ball well, going the other way.
Yeah, no, Darcy Wilmot was absolutely fantastic. Again, he had a fantastic final series last season, and I think he's still having a fantastic final series this season as well. It maybe even stepped it up a little bit more. But for my votes, if you know me, I love a good midfield bull. I love someone who loves to tackle. It's why I've always loved Matt Rowell. Again, I've talked about Jack Crisp a lot over for Collingwood, but I went with Josh Dunkley. Like 18 tackles is nuts. 30 and like 34 pressure acts or whatever, however many it was. Like that's what I love when it comes to a midfield game.
Half of his pressure acts were tackles.
Exactly.
Not just getting the cheap point for corralling. He's getting the job done.
No, he was getting the job done. So he gets my votes. Will Ashcroft gets my 4 votes. Again, at pretty much the same reasons you mentioned. He was fantastic ball in hand, did so much work. Again, stepped into Lachie Neale's role with that whilst Neale is out with injury. So he did phenomenally. I went Harris Andrews with my 3 votes. Again, just phenomenal work in that defense. He's been an outstanding defender, like pretty much all season long, even though he has had a little bit of lapses when Brisbane was struggling a little bit, but he's always been consistent and we love that from him. My 2 votes went to Matt Rowell because I think he was one of the key players to try and keep the Suns in it when he could, but the lack of just conversion up forward meant obviously that nothing really came out of it all that much. But again, he kicked a goal himself. He, was still doing fairly solid pressure work. He was doing a lot of good clearance work, which he's been doing all season long. So I figured he's shown very good signs this game. And then my number 1 went to Dane Zorko because his movement off of halfback, pushing through that midfield, was pretty much second to none. Like he's doing some fantastic work still, and it's always good to see.
Yeah, I think we both had the same idea. Like their halfback was very good. It's just I went for the person who generated a few more intercepts, and you went from the person who generated a bit more meterage.
Yes.
But both fantastic off the halfback.
So that brings us to the end of our week 2 votes. So our total tallies: Jai Newcomb jumps into the lead with 12 points. Josh Dunkley, very close second place on 11 points. Jack Gunston and Will Ashcroft both on 9 points. Max Holmes is on 8. Jordan De Goey on 7. Josh Battle on 6. Tom Atkins on 5. Harris Andrews on 5 as well. Lloyd Meek on 3. Darcy Fort on 2. And Big Billy Frampton also on 2. For the confirmed totals for the players that are eliminated, but we still like to consider them, Noah Anderson is on 9 votes. Caleb Sarong on 7.
Can't win it, obviously.
Yes, but it's only fair enough to mention because we consider them in our votes anyway. Caleb Sarong on 7. Tom Green on 5. Brody Hewland on 3. Alex Pearce on 3. Alex Neil-Bullen also on 3. Matt Rowell on 2. Josh Worrell on 1. And Alex Davies also on 1.
Yeah, so as I said, it is shaping up to be a thing. We're going to have to figure out how we manage a 4 vote to 3. Oh, sorry, a 4. You know what I'm talking about. a team that had to play 4 games versus a team that had to play 3 games if that happens. But otherwise, Newcomb looks to be dead set. Good chance to win it if Hawthorn managed to get through. Otherwise, you would be thinking of a Dunkley or a Ashcroft.
Yes.
But again, since it's been so even, I think it's going to be interesting because anyone can still win it. Big Billy Frampton, all he needs is a couple of 5s, and he is leading the vote.
Yeah, if he gets a perfect game this week, and obviously if Collingwood win and move into the grand final, and has a perfect game next week, the week after, or next week, then he could absolutely steal it. But that also depends on who we give the other votes to, of course. But that is not what we're here to talk about. We're now here to preview our preliminary final games, starting with a Friday night blockbuster at the MCG. All 3 of our final games are going to be at the MCG, of course. With Geelong and Hawthorn starting us off.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, it's going to be interesting in the fact that, Geelong, I think clearly the favourites. They have to be. But as I said, we said before that the Geelong weren't really tested that much before the final series.
They did have a fairly
they do
run
face they do face a different style of team coming into Hawthorn, who again a lot more centered on the outside than a Brisbane, who they easily dispatched. Also probably have the defense to counteract the couple of tolls in Neil and Cameron. So they might have a little advantage there. But as for in general, Geelong's won the last few meetings out against Hawthorn. Last 3 games have been victories for the Cats. And it's sort of hard because I think this is where Hawthorn's defense, turns into not as great. And again, this is talking about one of the best offenses in the league. When you got the Cats who have so many ground level players, Hawthorn will have to work out the defense and they can do this. So where they're probably going to have to try and intercept early, rather than try and let the ball go into the Cats' back line. We have seen teams like Brisbane turn on the screws by generating those early intercepts. So, if they push a Scrimshaw up, I think he'll be a very important player in this matchup if Hawthorn's a chance. Even Sicily, who plays up the ground a bit more, I think he'll be very important. And then the other way, they're going to have to convert fairly well. So that midfield battle is going to be a very interesting one. 2 teams that you wouldn't say are like the strongest midfield ever. Geelong are very efficient with the way that they generate and are great at just getting the ball forward to where they are able to lock the ball in. Whereas Hawthorn, they do prefer to win it on the outside, move the ball there to try and work it in. But as I said, in general, I just think if the Cats are going to get enough entries and bring the ball to ground, as long as their ground level players have a good game, I think this will be a Cats victory.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would love to see a Hawthorn upset, absolutely. But again, the way Geelong play is so clinical, and they're so good at punishing mistakes that the Hawks have to be very, very careful with how they play. And I know they like to play a little bit of chaos, but Geelong will absolutely punish that if that chaos is basically in the wrong step. Like if they step one wrong way in the chaos that they generate, Geelong will pounce on that. And it's a huge, huge risk. And whilst I think the Hawks defense matches up fairly well to Geelong forward line, it's definitely going to be a lot of that midfield play that'll be a massive factor.
I would say midfield or halfback, because I think with the Hawthorn style of halfback, because Geelong do like to force those forward half turnovers, not as heavy as Brisbane, but still like to. I think Hawthorn's got the good long kickers to get it past that. It's just making sure those kicks don't get intercepted by like a Tom Stewart, depending on how long the kicks is, like a Jack Henry or whatever. If the Hawks can connect with those outside marks to good players, so You're looking at D'Ambrosio, Josh Weddle. They may be able to counteract, but if they don't hit it, Geelong's just going to able to find a few more entries. That'll help ensure the odds to get them a win. As I said, there's avenues where Hawks can win. They deserve to be in this prelim. I'm not going to say that they're just going to rock up and get flogged, but I do just think that, Geelong will have a dominant period sometime in the match, and it's probably going to be to the margin of about 30 points.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. All right, let's jump over to our second preliminary final, again at the MCG, a twilight game with the 5:15 start Eastern Time of Collingwood and Brisbane.
Yeah, so this is the one where I think most people are expecting to be a fairly close game, even though in recent history it hasn't been. We had the very weird events of this year where Collingwood went to Brisbane and absolutely flogged them. Probably one of the more surprising games for a good team in the first half. And then Brisbane pretty much did the opposite at the MCG, having a very dominant performance. The match before that was that very, very close match in the regular season, one of the best matches of the year, where Collingwood won by a point over Brisbane. But as for this game, again, it's going to be really hard because if the Lions generate a lot of good forward half game, as I said, Collingwood, yeah, their defense looked really good against Adelaide, but as you mentioned, they're not too far removed from being downright awful like they were in the last half. Well, not last half, the last 3 games of this year.
Yeah.
But as I said, Brisbane, they're a bit of a scrappier team than, they generate a few turnovers. Do like to control the ball, but Collingwood are restricting that as well. So if they can't get the outside game going, they are a bit loose. It's going to be the movement of halfback. For Brisbane, it's going to be stopping Collingwood from getting that fast meterage, because we know that Brisbane don't have the perfect defense. They were good against Gold Coast, but they had their game plan really set up. Gold Coast didn't have much fast movement against. So for Brisbane, it's going to be about preventing as few fast-paced entries from going the other way. So their forwards, they're not as great as it was last year. So they're going to really have to work hard to make sure that Darcy Moore doesn't get into the game like he did against Adelaide. Even a big Billy Frampton. I know it's not going to get like 10 intercept marks and like 10 score involvements, but if he aids and allows Moore to get off the chain, I think one of the things is for Brisbane, they've got to make sure their forwards separate. You don't want, even if you sacrifice like a goal or here or there, like it's worth it just not to generate like 5 goals from the back half. So Brisbane, they're probably going to be working a bit off ground level anyway. And as I said, it's just going to be, it's going to be one of those things where I think it's not going to be the highest scoring game. I think it's going to be one of the most pressure-filled games we're going to see this finals. But I think I really just want to say Brisbane just because I don't want it to be an old Melbourne grand final. But I just got the hunch that Collingwood just have something. Like, I know they looked pathetic a bit before the finals, but just the way they approached Adelaide, I think has me thinking they're going to expose some of the young, raw talent of Brisbane.
Yeah, I definitely think that Collingwood will likely take the win here. What they showed against the Crows, and the adaptability that they played, that they just had as a whole in that game, even with the holes that they still kind of have in their defense, was really, really, really solid. And that's something that they're definitely able to do against the Lions. They've shown it before that they can do it against the Lions. What I want to see from the Lions is pretty much more of what they did against the Suns, only at a little bit more intensity, because Collingwood are going to bring that extra intensity. So they need to be on their mark. If they're able to do that, if they're able to get it to their forward line to convert efficiently, whether that's Archie, whether it's a couple of their midfields pushing up, whether Charlie Cameron is able to finally get into the game again. We would love to see that, of course. I think Brisbane can 100% take it from the Pies, but I would not be surprised if our grand final does end up being Geelong and Collingwood.
Yeah, a throwback to, what was it, 2011? Yeah, 11, I think.
Yeah, I think that was the last time these two faced off in the grand final.
Yeah, it was Collingwood. That's right. Hey, Geelong.
Yeah,
That
because
was that
Geelong won
one.
in 2011, but Collingwood was hot off the heels of the 2010 grand final.
Yeah. So
That
I do
makes sense.
actually have a team matchup question. Oh, probably team thing, because I know it's sort of, it's going to be a harsh call, but Oscar McInerney plays roughly what? Oh, I've got the stats here. 70% on time on ground. Not that much impact. Darcy Fort taking a lot of the tap work. What do you think about, like, I think you still got to play him, but do you start to put him in the forward line? Oh, sorry, in the do you start as you assume that is working towards full fitness? Do you put him in the ruck, or do you say, okay, Darcy Fort, he's been pretty solid in the ruck work. We're going to use Darcy Oscar McInerney as a forward. Logan Morris, I actually think he had a pretty good game against the Suns, but he just dropped a few marks. But he can be a bit, you can't just rely on such a young player to perform. And Ty Gallup is obviously a very raw talent.
Yes.
Do you go Oscar McInerney in the forward line? Do you, switch it up between, Darcy Fort taking a bit more forward? Or do you even consider dropping one of McInerney and Fort to be able to play a bit more of a smaller forward line, or even just, I don't think they have any. I mean, I guess they could bring in Sam Day again, but he has been very, very suspect with his form. I think it would be probably worth sticking with Gardner or
My big
Fort, but I
concern,
mean, you can consider it.
my big concern is that I think regardless of who you pick, I think Darcy Cameron is just better, like overall, and is just going to beat them around the ground and in the ruck contest. So I think they have to. I think maybe take out the Big O. As much as I love the Big O, I think his body's
Yeah.
starting to give up on him. And go for more speed, more intercept, more
Mm.
being able to disrupt the ball in the stoppage or in the center and get it out of the Collingwood midfield. Like
Yeah.
try and disrupt the way that they're set up.
Yeah, and I know it's weird, like, saying this in a period of time where Charlie Cameron is being pretty quiet, to be nice to Charlie Cameron. They've got a lot of goals out of their small forwards, so you know what I mean? It's just like, it's not a strength of theirs. It's like, you have to decide, and this is the week to do it, because, you may have gotten away with it. I think it's worth testing it out against the Gold Coast. So it's not disrespect to them. But you know what I mean? I think the lines, with or without, Oscar, McInerney, like, I don't think that's a big enough difference, because they obviously have so much age experience. But up against Collingwood, which, again, one of the oldest teams in the comp, you can't afford to lose as much matchups, because you would expect a lot more even performances. You have to decide, and you have to be pretty cruel to figure out what you do in that regard. And as I said, I wouldn't be 100% surprised to see him drop. I do want to see them persist with Darcy Fort in the midfield, because I think that you at the very least have to have a run with player with Darcy Cameron. And I don't think Oscar McInerney, with the fitness that we've seen, is the person to do it, unless he just kills training,
Yeah, I completely agree. So before we do our farewells for this week's episode, I want to briefly mention the VFL Grand Final, which is happening this week. Over at Saturday, 2:15 p.m. at Icon Park, where the Bulldogs will host the Southport Sharks. The Dogs, of course, dismantled Box Hill over the weekend, and Southport absolutely dominated Frankston with like a 90+ defeat. Like, absolute domination by them. So if you're interested, and obviously can't afford to go to the AFL finals, feel free to go check out the VFL finals. It's still going to be an absolute fantastic game. But otherwise, that especially if you
Oh,
want to see a player like Adam Treloar kind
Vic
of
Bice.
tear it up.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you were about to wrap up.
Well, I am, but like, unless you want to talk about like, I know the Sandford Grand Finals was on last weekend. Um,
Hello?
I'm not entirely sure who won. It's the
What state league could I possibly be
I know
talking
you're
about,
talking about the
Blazy?
waffle. I know you want to talk about the waffle. I'll bring it up.
Yes.
Hang on, let me bring it up. Go on.
I've got it. I've got it. It's all right. So in this final series, it was maybe a bit of a surprise. Claremont getting beaten by East Perth. In the prelim, the way the waffle works is there's only one game before the grand final because the winner of the initial game goes straight through, which was South Fremantle, who absolutely dispatched East Perth the first time. Unfortunately, the preliminary final, it was very close. In absolutely miserable conditions, kicking of East Perth 7-4-46 to defeat the very almost Claremont. They've been in and around the last so many years and just never made it. 5-11-41. So it will be a South Fremantle East Perth grand final. I don't think either of these teams have won it for a while because Peel won last year over East Perth. But yeah, as I said, looking through the past, I think it's going to be a new winner in quite a while. I think the first time these teams will have won in this decade.
Interesting. I mean, a lot of these teams in the
South
waffle.
Fremantle won in 2020. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. But again, like a lot of these teams in the waffle have such deep histories. So for the fact that like a 50-50 could be like semi-counted because again, the COVID season, granted, even though like Perth was like very much secluded from a lot of the rest of the country during that year, like the fact that a lot of these teams again like haven't really won the waffle themselves in a while, just have these deep histories is just always so interesting to look at. Again, like just briefly going back to the VFL, like Southport isn't technically a VFL team. They came from the NEFL up in Queensland. Obviously, when the NEFL folded, those teams folded into the VFL because they still wanted to be represented and compete. To be fair, Southport was kind of like the only one. Otherwise, it was just like the AFL designated reserve teams, being Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney, and the Giants, of course. But like the fact that there are so many still like individual teams that are still very competitive, still bring up plenty of players that make it into an AFL system. Like these are the sorts of games that you want to go check out. The waffle, the sandfall, like they're always so interesting. So just watch and keep an eye on.
And for the waffle, as I said, they had a parity problem, which was very big in the 2010s, where pretty much it was just dominated by Subiaco and Peel. Whereas now, Subiaco is sort of in the gutter, unfortunately with my Mighty Swannies, but we're not here to talk about that. But yeah, as I said, we've had pretty relatively decent mix of teams making finals. So it is a lot good to see. And the crowds have been pretty decent leading up to it. Obviously a bit quiet in the prelims, being absolutely miserable weather. But yeah, as I said, hopefully we will get about, a decent 10,000 maybe. Not 10,000, 20,000 maybe at Optus Stadium as it normally is.
That would be pretty awesome. But yeah, that brings us to the end of episode 76. Thank you all so much, of course, for coming to hang out with us this week. Please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Go check out our socials, of course. Check mine out. Not the Sorix active, but go check his out if you want.
You don't have to check out my socials. Don't feel obliged.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the prelims. Thankfully, we both, again, as we had mentioned at the start of the episode, have fairly quiet weeks this week. So we'll definitely be keeping our eye predominantly on the footy, whether it's on the men's, on the women's, and of course the state leagues. I'm hoping to do probably a couple more streams. We'll probably yap about the big Marvel Rivals tournament that I just finished over the weekend. It's why I'm so tired. I apologize if I look really tired. I have been awake at this
Uh,
point for doing quick maths, like 15, 16 hours. So I'm gonna go have a little nap before I gotta go edit all of this together. But otherwise, thank you also so much for coming
yeah.
out. And we'll see you all next week.
Just
Oh, yeah, go on.
I'm because I might as well plug it. Yeah, I've been ranking the hottest 100 of Australian artists with Epic Tiffy, her Twitch. Yeah, just Epic Tiffy. Having a lot of fun at doing that. So if you instead of wanting me to endlessly talk about football, you want me to endlessly talk about music. We're getting to number one. Over the next 2 weeks. Check out that.
Yes, go check out our
Yeah,
dear friend of the show. Like she is amazing, and
yeah, she's
maybe at one
wonderful.
point we'll have her on for like an AFL versus NRL kind of conversation.
Yeah. As I said, she is cheering on the Broncos. He had a massive win over the. That was probably the most exciting
They did.
NRL
The city of
final.
Brisbane was going off because of the
Mm,
Lions and the
mm.
Broncos wins.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that was a pretty huge, well, not a huge upset, but huge win for the Broncos, who are trying to win their premiership in the slew of Storm and Penrith
Oh
finals wins.
yeah,
So yeah,
I've seen how intense it currently is over in the NRL. But
mm,
yeah, so I mean, if you're into the NRL, like, be sure to cheer on your team, of course. Otherwise, come join us
yeah.
at the AFL.
We got no idea what's going on in the NRL. I respect it, but I could not tell you a NRL tactic apart from tackle the opposition team with the ball.
Pretty much. But yes, that will do us for episode 78, 78, 76, 76. My apologies. So we will see you all next week for episode 77, where we break down the prelims, cover any other retirees and any other big news that come out, and preview, of course, the 2025 AFL Grand Final. So until then, take care.